Welcome to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews, the only show that's going to teach you how to be somebody.
Thank you again. Appreciate your time. We're going to talk about the story of Cypress Semiconductor called 0 to a Billion.
You're not going to make it. It's not like being a star quarterback.
You guys are all leaders. You guys are trying to crush it.
Ladies and gentlemen, whatever's going on in your life, you're going to run into that block.
Recognize that you're leaving 95% of American business completely behind.
You guys are here learning, getting education.
You're going to run into someone standing there.
No. Michael Jordan's humility is what we're talking about.
Saying to you, you're not good enough to get through to the other side. And I say to you, let's roll, baby. Let's roll.
And I just want to just kind of catch up a little bit too on like what you've got going on. I mean,
yeah,
you've been, seems like your podcast has been just going out of control with growth and all sorts of cool stuff. And you've got a really awesome kind of niche that you talk about with emotional intelligence specifically. And I think that's just obviously one of the most important attributes to kind of rounding yourself off as a person, but also as a business leader, as a leader in itself. So how's everything been going with you, man?
yeah. Thanks, Aaron. So thanks for having me, first of all, and two, dude, you're just a constant inspiration, man. Just watching all the stuff that you do. You know, there's a verse in the Bible, Proverbs 27:17, is iron sharpens iron, big Aaron sharpens big Poppy, man. So thank you for for all the iron.
Well, that's what we were just talking about this off the air a little bit too. Is it's unusual to find at least in our network, this West Point network, you know, the entrepreneurs that lift each other up. It always becomes so competitive, and we're not even in competing markets. It's just,
Right.
It makes no sense to be that way,
Right.
other than just kind of ego.
Yeah, right. And man, for me, talking about EQ here, right, is I know for me, dude, I have the natural tendency to be so prideful and so selfish.
Right.
And so anything that I can do to actively combat that is my goal, so that I don't get tempted to get prideful and arrogant. And so I you know, because I just, you know, the Bible says, man, pride goes before the fall. And I mean, and you don't need the Bible to tell you that. Just look around, right? It happened. You see it happen
Yeah.
so frequently in business and stuff. And so and I think being emotionally healthy and emotionally intelligent, now I can come from a much healthier place in business as an entrepreneur, as a husband, as a father, than I ever have before. 4 years ago, I was, man, I've got a whole list. Actually, I was toxic positivity. I was emotionally codependent, emotionally needy, people pleaser addict, so many different dysfunctions that I have had to overcome, and in some cases still overcoming.
Yeah.
I've got a list here, Aaron. Let me just show you this list, or not show you, but I'll talk through this list here real quickly. So this is just a small chunk of my emotional dysfunction that I have had to work through and overcome. Emotionally needy, emotionally codependent, a food addict, a people pleaser addict, a toxic positivity, using positivity as a coping mechanism, chronically late, chronically forgetful, chronically unorganized, chronic procrastinator, chronic oversleeper, depression. I was suicidal for 2 years straight, ADD, ADHD, self-condemnation, self-hatred, self-sabotage, insecure, indecisive, no self-awareness, no self-management, hairpin trigger for anger, no boundaries personally or professionally, never stood up for myself, always caved, constantly looking for validation and approval, fear of success, fear of money, praise and hatred were both all consuming, no self-worth and no self-esteem, just to name a few. So
That's a hell of a list. But I mean, I think everybody can hear that list and find that they have those same attributes to varying degrees probably in their life, right?
yeah, for sure. I think there are many that can relate to some degree or another, for sure, with even some of those. And so what kind of to sort of where I'm at today. So I have been very intensely working on a very consistent emotional fitness program for the past 4 years. And what has happened as a result of this very intentional emotional fitness program, 2 years into my emotional fitness program, all these areas of my life started to change for the better. My faith, my marriage, my parenting, my fitness, my finances, my business, all these different areas. And I'm like, man, has this all been due to my emotional dysfunction and of why I haven't made this progress before. And so I told my wife, I'm like, babe, I've got to start a podcast sharing the junk in my trunk and my lessons learned from my failures, what I'm learning through my emotional growth journey. And because I'm like, I can't be the only emotionally clueless guy out there, right? There's got to be other nobles out there that have been scared to step into this arena, not talk about it, whatever. And so started the podcast, and a few months into it, a lot of my buddies, so I've got a few different social circles. So I've got a military circle, I've got, active duty and retired, veterans and stuff. I've got an entrepreneur circle. I've got a homeschool circle because we homeschool our kid. And then we've been very active in the homeschool community for the last decade. And then business executives, leadership, and all that kind of stuff. And so about 3 to 4 months into my podcast, I had a number of guys reach out. Hey, dude, this is great, but like we need gap fillers. Like we need like more. What else do you have? So we started a course teaching emotional intelligence, an 8-week course teaching how to be an emotionally intelligent leader. And it was a small, the funny thing is, as solopreneurs, all our time was to putting the content and the course together. We did no marketing. So it was literally all word of mouth. So we had maybe 15 to 20 folks go through our first course. And one of those was a CEO of a company, a buddy of mine who took a company in the last 12 years from zero, didn't exist 12 years ago, to now it's a $300 million international company with a lot of employees and stuff. And he went through my first emotional intelligence course, and then all the other folks went through it too, and it was great and everything. 6 months later, we did 1 or 2 other emotional intelligence courses that kind of trickled, had a few folks in it, but it was kind of decreasing in size. So I'm like, man, okay, so the course obviously isn't the way they go. The entrepreneur pivot. You got to pivot as an entrepreneur constantly. So
right.
So what we did was, in December of, I don't remember, 19 or 20, we're praying, okay, God, man, what do you want us to do with this business? Where's this going? Because the course isn't really, it was transforming everyone that went through it, but we did do no marketing effort. And so it ended up being the first week in January, my buddy, the CEO who took the course 6 months earlier, called me up and said, hey, Noble, would you be willing to put together an emotionally intelligent leader development program, coaching program for me and my top 8 executives of my $300 million company? I said, absolutely. So started that. 3 months later, another one of my classmates called me up and said, hey, Noble, I just got this leadership consulting contract, coaching contract with this $4 billion company, but I just got hired on as a full-time COO of this other company. I can't fulfill my contract with a $4 billion company. Would you be willing to help me out doing some of the leadership coaching? And can you include some of your emotional intelligence stuff? I'm like, absolutely. So God started to open up these doors, right? And then since then, through a whole veteran connection, a guy, and this is actually a recent one, a guy reached out to me and said, hey, Noble, I'm following your podcast. I've been watching all your stuff, loving what you're doing with EQ. My company is wanting some emotional intelligent leadership stuff, with an emphasis on the EQ piece. Would you be willing to submit a proposal, whatever? I said, absolutely. So I went against a big EQ company that has lots of coaches and big company. And it was me. And I met with the president of this division, this $10 billion company, and his leadership guy and his COO, and just, shared. And one of the questions was, Noble, how what's your qualifications? I said, well, let me rattle off all my emotional dysfunction that I've overcome. I said, I don't have a PhD from Harvard in behavioral psychology, right? If that's what you're looking for, I'm not your guy. So I shared all my dysfunction. I said, for the past 4 years, I've been very intensely working on this stuff. And now I teach it, and executive coach, et cetera. And then he said, okay, great. Monday, we're hearing from, a competitor of yours, a big company, and we'll let you know on Wednesday how it goes. He calls me up on Wednesday. Hey, dude, we want you 100%. And I said, okay, if you don't mind, it's kind of a David and Goliath story. I said, do you mind just sharing why? He said, dude, those folks showed up in suits, and it was the salespeople. It wasn't the coach or a coach, salespeople. He's like, dude, you're totally relatable. You speak our language. We want you to do it. Well, anyway, then check this out, how God works, bro. So he said, I've got 40 executives, 40 leaders that I want you to start coaching. How do we do this? I said, well, first, let me meet your 40 folks on Zoom, because these guys are all over the country. Let me meet your 40 folks on Zoom, and let me just do a quick introduction. And he said, I'm just letting you know you are going to have a percentage of these guys that are going to give you lots of pushback, and they're not going to want to do this. I said, bro, bring it. Right. That was me 4 years ago. So like I was that guy 4 years ago that would have said, I don't need EQ. Like I'm totally emotionally intelligent while being completely emotionally clueless. And so he said, all right, I don't say I didn't warn you. I said, no sweat. So boom, 40 folks, all these big leaders from all over the country, they jump on the call, and I did the same, right? I'm vulnerable. So I said, here's all the junk in my trunk. The other guy said, what's your qualifications? I said, all this junk in my trunk. I have a PhD in stuffing and avoiding and, being emotionally clueless. And I said, but last 4 years, right? Gave him a whole story. And so they're all rolling. They're like, oh, this is going to be great. The guy called me up afterwards and said, dude, the group that we knew was going to give you a hard time, they were rolling. Like they can't wait to jump in with this.
Wow. And
then this guy told me this. He said, Noble, so I'm the president of my division of this $10 billion company. My boss was on the call also. We didn't tell you, but he was on the call. So he wants to go through your coaching, get your EQ assessment and stuff, and get coached by you. And he said, if it goes well with him, he wants to introduce you to the 47 other divisions of this $10 billion company. And so, so I'm like, wow, just so humbled, man, and thankful to be in this position for just, I never would have thought, this is how I know God has a sense of humor, that the guy who's been emotionally clueless for most of my life, former Army Airborne Ranger from the 82nd and, big bald tattoo guy, is now teaching people how to be emotionally intelligent and emotionally healthy. But I tell him, I said, listen, I am still very much on this journey. This is not some from textbooks I read a few years ago. Like, I am on this journey. I'm just maybe a few years ahead of you, 4 years ahead of you, but like I am still working on stuff, right? This is just like physical fitness is important. Spiritual fitness is important. Why don't most people have an emotional fitness program? Because it impacts every single person, every area of our lives, right? So anyway, that's some of the stuff that God just opened up lots of doors.
You have been up to a lot. That's awesome. I mean, that is absolutely awesome. And I'm just, when we caught up a couple of years back, at one of our conferences, and just seeing what you've been able to do with your podcast and the types of guests and the types of, stories and things that you were able to share has been really, really outstanding. So I appreciate you sharing kind of the latest rundown. But I want to talk, let's go to the foundation first of this, right? So, if you look at data of what makes a person successful, you're going to see high levels of IQ, high levels of conscientiousness or discipline, or the ability to, finish out a task, great ability to kind of negotiate and stick up for themselves and on their behalf. Why has EQ come into the mainstream as of late? What is your opinion of where that fits in on the journey to success as a leader, as an entrepreneur, and as just a family man, or whatever you happen to be?
Yeah, that's great, Aaron. So I'll give you my opinion after I give you some research here. So from a book, I know the podcast listeners aren't maybe able to see this, but it's called The Emotionally Intelligent Leader. It's a book by Daniel Goleman. He's one of the OGs of emotional intelligence. He wrote a book called Emotional Intelligence, 20, 30 years ago. He kind of really brought it into mainstream, or helped bring it into mainstream. So this is a book that he wrote from Harvard Business Review, and a lot of his articles, a compilation of his articles. So check this out. Harvard University psychologists found that leaders with strengths in a critical mass of 6 or more emotional intelligence competencies were far more effective than peers who lacked such strengths. For instance, when he analyzed the performance of division heads at a global food and beverage company, he found that among leaders with this critical mass of competence, 87% placed in the top third for annual salary bonuses based on their business performance. More telling, their divisions on average outperformed yearly revenue targets by 15 to 20%. Those executives who lacked emotional intelligence were rarely rated as outstanding in their annual performance reviews, and their divisions underperformed by an average of almost 20%. So to answer your question, emotional intelligent leadership absolutely affects the bottom line. So it may feel or sound or seem, abstract and warm fuzzy and that kind of thing, but it absolutely has a direct impact on the bottom line. And for me, what's super fulfilling for me is that it doesn't just make us better executives, better leaders, better entrepreneurs, increase revenue, all that kind of stuff. It also makes me a better husband, a better father, a better, parent, a better brother, sister, uncle, aunt, etc.
Yeah. So, okay. So I think I'm with you, it's starting to be picked up in MBA classrooms. This is being picked up in a lot of leadership courses. This is the importance of emotional intelligence. What are, you rattled off a lot of, kind of emotional blocks that you've had to overcome in your day, but what are kind of the key facets to emotional intelligence, at least in the view that you teach?
Yeah, that's great. So I'll give you a few different answers to that. So emotional intelligence is the ability to get your emotions working for you instead of against you. And emotions are like blood. Everybody's got it. There's not even my hardcore logical analytical people. Well, I don't have emotions, or I shut off my emotions, or my emotions don't affect me. That's all BS. You're just not aware of how your emotions impact you. Emotions physiologically, every decision we make goes through the emotion center of our brain before it ever hits our logical center of our brain. Everybody, it's how we're wired and designed. So for someone to say, hey, it doesn't affect me, is like saying my blood doesn't affect me in what I do every day. That's one. So number two is emotional intelligence is the ability to, this is Noble's definition now, the ability to acknowledge, identify, process, and manage my own emotions and also the emotions of others. So in a framework, this is this one is from Daniel Goleman, from when he first kind of talked about this. 4 main areas of emotional intelligence. Now, again, this is the original one. There's a lot more since then, but the basic understanding is self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and social management. Or it's also talked about as relationship awareness, relationship management, social. So self and social awareness and management are the ways that I like to talk about it from a basic or general standpoint. Now, my EQ assessment that I got certified on covers 15 different areas of emotional intelligence from 5 main areas. It breaks it down into 15. The reason why I like my particular assessment, EQ assessment, is that it covers 2 of the 5 big areas that are broken into 15: stress management and decision making, which makes it great for leaders. It's a great assessment for leaders because every entrepreneur and leader faces, thousands of decisions every day and lots of opportunities for stress on a fairly regular basis. So those are kind of how I describe emotional intelligence.
There was a test we did at West Point when I was a firstie, and it was one of the more complicated one. I think it might have been one of the 15 area assessments. And I remember reading through it and kind of like seeing where my EQ was as a percentile holistically, and then what aspects of it. And the one that I stuck out the most was I was in the 99th percentile for stress management, which was really interesting, that I can handle a really high threshold of stress without it negatively affecting me. There were other problems, obviously, I had in a lot of other areas. But this is my podcast, so I can't talk about my weaknesses. No, but I think that was really interesting to see all the different aspects to it. Another one that's been pointed out to me by my wife, because she's the best at pointing out problems that I have, is when we're at like social get-togethers or whatever, she thinks because I tell really obnoxious jokes or whatever, and that I'm not aware that the joke is going wrong. And I'm like, I'm completely aware that the joke isn't landing, but the management, I can't do anything about it. Like, I am totally aware of a situation, how everybody's feeling and reacting to it, but I can't do anything about it. So like my awareness is fine, but my management is low. And I wanted to kind of get your opinion on kind of breaking down those different areas, you know, the difference between self-awareness, self-management, kind of the connection with the other people as well.
That's great awareness. That's it.
Yeah.
Right. The fact that you're aware of that, that's excellent. And even kind of how you talked about that was also great. And I would say is very, very normal. Everybody, just about everybody that I've worked with, you know, and I've got 75 coaching clients right now. And so, and I've been coaching for many, many years, and I have not met anybody yet that is great at all four. Typically, we have one or two of those areas that we're great at, one or two of those areas that we're not great at. And I'll give you a perfect example. So I was completely clueless with my self-awareness and even my self-management. But my social awareness and my social management were pretty high, but for unhealthy reasons. Because I was a people pleaser addict, I was constantly hyper aware. Oh, well, what did Aaron's eyebrow just do right there? Oh, what does that mean?
Right.
Does he like me? Does he not like me? Is he right? I was constantly seeking validation and approval from everybody. So I got really good at reading the crowd, reading the audiences and stuff. But again, for unhealthy reasons. But I had very little, if any, self-awareness and self-management.
That's really interesting. I mean, talk about the people pleaser side of you and how you recommend dealing with that. Because I think that a lot of people run into that issue, right? There's kind of like a couple extremes. There's and I'll just put these into two buckets because I think this is where most people fall, is they don't give a flying crap what other people think at all. And then there's the other side that they care too much what other people think. Walk me through those kind of two personalities.
Yeah, that's great. So again, I'm going to use me as the example. So I call myself the dirty underwear leader, right? I'll share my racing stripes of all my junk in my trunk and my dysfunction and stuff. And I'm thankful for my parents here, but I'm going to talk about an area where they were not super great, and they have many great qualities and characteristics. This is an area that they weren't, and it had an impact, had a consequence. One of the things I say is, no one leaves their childhood unscathed. No one leaves their childhood unscathed, and lottie-dottie, everybody develops our emotional foundation in our childhoods.
Mm-hmm.
Whether good, bad, whatever. If you had Leave It to Beaver childhood or Jerry Springer childhood, bottom line is we all develop our emotional foundations right in our childhood. So for me, my dad was super chill. He was an ER doctor for 30 some years until he died 13 years ago. My mom she taught Spanish at Oklahoma University. And so she raised me speaking Spanish. And in our house, so as early as I can remember, we would yell and scream at each other to deal with conflict. We'd yell and scream. Whoever yelled the loudest won. We'd stomp off into our respective corners of the house, come back and act like nothing happened. So there was zero conflict resolution skills that I learned. And I also learned from the jump, how to stuff and avoid my emotions. And what happens is if you had a childhood like me, that we never got our emotions validated or affirmed in our childhood, that leads to a truckload of consequences as an adult. In my case, how that played out was that turned into a hardcore people-pleasing addiction. Because I'd never got my emotions validated as a child, I tried to get them validated by everyone else around me as I got older, which turned into a hardcore people-pleasing addiction. And what's crazy is I didn't even know I was a people-pleaser addict until 4 years ago, when I started this emotional growth journey and started to discover something I like to call the emotional origin stories. We talk about, hey, what's the origin story of Superman, of Wonder Woman, of the Incredible Hulk, right? The origin story of superheroes. Well, we all have emotional origin stories. We all have emotional origin stories of every behavior that we do,
mm-hmm.
productive or unproductive, healthy or unhealthy. And so once I started to discover all these unhealthy emotional origin stories, I was able to start working on them, healing them, growing through them and stuff. And I started to realize, man, have I been a people pleaser addict this whole time? I was reading this book by oh man, you'd know him. He was like the Hall of Fame guy, football guy. He was a football coach for Florida a handful of years ago.
Urban Meyer.
Urban Meyer, that's it. Urban
Yeah.
Meyer's book, and he said, you know, in one of the middle of the book, he's like, yeah, my personal leadership philosophy is this, and I'm like, he has a personal leadership philosophy, like what on earth? Why is that so shocking to me? And the reason it was so shocking is because I've never had my own leadership philosophy because I've been a people pleaser addict. So if I was around Aaron long enough, oh, well, I'm going to adopt Aaron's leadership philosophy because, you know, man, he must know what's going on, and I want him to like me. So I'm going to write, oh, West Point. Oh, well, West Point says this is what a leader is. So man, West Point, they've got to be right. So I've got to take, oh, the 82nd. Oh, the 82nd's leadership. I never had developed my own leadership philosophy because I was a people pleaser addict. So as I started to get healthier emotionally, I started to realize how exhausting it is to live where every single decision I made was trying to seek out the approval and validation, affirmation of other people around me. And so that's why I say, so many successful people, Aaron, that I've coached and worked with and stuff, so many of them are successful for unhealthy reasons. Now, the other spectrum for folks that, hey, screw you, I don't care what you say. Again,
which you get a lot of in the entrepreneur space, right? You get a lot of the like, F the system, be my own boss, whatever. I don't care what you think. And it's like, well, now you're out of touch too. So there's an issue here.
That's exact. So again, let me use me as an example. So in my EQ assessment, the one that I've got is the 15 things. One of the 15 areas of emotional intelligence in this particular assessment is independence. Well, my independence was almost off the charts. And I'm like, as a people pleaser addict, that's really weird that I would have hardcore independence because I am that guy that you just shared. Screw the system, screw rules. Don't try to tell me what to do to a fault. And so I'm like, man, where is that coming from? Like, why am I so hardcore against the system? And check this out, dude. This was life-changing for me. When as early as and again, I love my mom. I'm so thankful for my mom. This was just another consequence, another area, right, that was created. As early as I can remember, my mom took, dude, I'm not exaggerating, 15 to 20 pictures of me every single day of my life. Every single day of my life. When we went out into public, you know, my mom's a hardcore extrovert. We would meet strangers in the restaurant. Every restaurant we went out to dinner, whatever, she would pose me with these strangers and my family, dad and my sister and stuff, with these strangers. Stand here. Oh, no, stand over here. No, stand. And dude, I'm wanting to crawl under the chair, right? Because these strangers, like, who on earth are you people? Who is this lady? Why are we getting a picture with this family? And mom's telling us what to do, right? Every single day of my life, that's what I remember. And so it created such a significant emotional thing in me that anybody who tries to tell me what to do, it's a visceral response. So I'm going to do the complete opposite because I got told what to do in emotionally and socially very embarrassing, awkward situations. No, I'm going to do whatever you tell me to do. I'm doing the opposite, right? Now, check this out. This is how this stuff gets generational, bro. It used to drive me nuts where I was pissed, I was upset that my mom would do this until I finally discovered why on earth, Mom, are you taking so many freaking pictures? I had a sister who was 4 years older than me. When I don't think I've ever shared this on a podcast. When my sister, so my sister was 5 months old, and my parents went on a date night. They dropped off my sister, dropped off my sister at the babysitter. The babysitter had a 5-year-old boy, who kicked her in the chest and killed her when she was 5 months old. They come back from the date night, or they got a phone call, obviously come back, and of course their daughter's dead. And so it took them 4 years before they finally had me. Well, the mindset of my mom is, I don't know if my son's going to get killed or die, or I want to capture as many memories as I can of my son while I've got him, because I don't know how long he's going to be with me. So, but of course, I didn't know that when I was a kid right at every age. But that's how stuff gets generational. How our emotional issues get transferred into the next generation.
Wow. Wow, that's crazy. I mean, that was a heavy story, brother. But it's weird. I mean, I can see how you start to compound these beliefs and these mechanisms since your childhood. And I'm watching my son, who's 11 months old now, and everything he learns is through a lens created by me and my wife. And you can see how this happens over time. The words that he's learning are from stuff I'm saying. So this is every single thing he's learning and believing to be true is coming from me. So I can see how impactful your family relationship is, the environment around you, and how this can start to create the decisions and the emotional behaviors that you start to live with as it goes on, which is really interesting. What I'm kind of curious about is when you're starting to kind of work with a person and you're starting to get into their background, their what kind of trauma they may have or have not had, and how you can coach that through. Because what I look at is the classic question, nature nurture, right? As a leader, can the EQ be made, or are you born with it? Where do you stand on that spectrum? Is it a mix of both? What do you think?
Great question. So it's both. It's both because a couple things. So again, no one leaves our childhoods unscathed. How many of us are trained on how to work with, interact with, deal with, learn from our emotions? 99% of people are not. Now like you said, it's getting more popular, getting more mainstream. So, and like when our daughter was 4, we started to teach her, my wife started to teach her some really great emotional skills, emotional tools, which have been life-changing now that our daughter's 14. And it's been life-changing for me also, that if I had not started my emotional fitness journey 4 years ago, there's no doubt in my mind I'd be paying for my daughter's therapy right now because of all my emotional dysfunction. So yes, the more intentional you are as a parent to obviously teach, coach, and train and mentor your children to be emotionally intelligent, that's going to be massive. So that nurture, that intentional nurture, is going to be massive in impacting their adulthood and the rest of their life. Sure. Now, the other factors when I coach somebody, there's a lot of things that I'm looking at. And again, I'm not, so disclaimer again, I'm not a psychologist, psychiatrist, all that kind of stuff. I have been a very intentional people studier for 4 decades and have read probably 1,000 books on people and leadership and all that kind of stuff. And the things that EQ impacts the EQ impacts are personality, strengths, love languages, right? Are just to name a few. So you can have an emotionally healthy. So there are spectrums of emotionally healthy versions of your personality and emotionally unhealthy versions of your personality. So, for example, for me, as an extrovert, and you Myers-Briggs or DISC or whatever the model is. So I'm high I, influencer, and dominant, or it's called a sanguine choleric using the other personality plus model.
Yeah, DISC is the ID.
Yep.
CS,
yep.
Right?
DISC. Yep. So dominant, influencer, steady, conscientious. So I'm high influencer and dominant, but because I was emotionally unhealthy, my I and D were coming from very emotionally needy places.
Mm-hmm.
So am I still ID? Yes, I'm still ID, but I'm a much emotionally healthier a version of that now, because I'm not emotionally needy like I used to be. Now, not that I've arrived, not that I'm emotionally healthy, but I'm emotionally healthier. And so sometimes so when I'm coaching somebody, their personality is getting impacted by is exacerbated, right? So their strengths and weaknesses can be
I see. Yeah.
exacerbated, right, by their level of emotional health and emotional intelligence in addition to their strengths. So Strengths Finder 2.0, I'm sure you probably heard of that, right?
Yep.
Great tool. I use that a lot of my coaching clients as well. Gallup poll, it's a big organization. And so shockingly, my number one strength is called woo, which is winning others over. So I'm the guy that has never met a stranger. I can connect very easily, rapport builder, et cetera, et cetera. But because when I was emotionally unhealthy, my woo was off the charts. Right? I would attempt to win others over so much that it would shut them off. Right? It would turn them off. So every strength can be a weakness if you're not emotionally healthy, coming from an emotionally healthy place.
I think
Right?
that makes a
So
lot. Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. And if you think about it in the aspect of stress, for example, how you respond to stress, and if you are not trained on managing your emotions under a stressful circumstance, it becomes very easy to let that kind of negative side of you out. But if you are trained in understanding on how to manage a stressful circumstance, it's very different. I've never really seen my wife stressed until we had a kid, because like a baby, you have a baby, falls down, hits his eye, and all of a sudden it's bleeding. And she called me in just this absolute panic. But we had gone through a lot of just kind of like stress management and tools, like just as part of West Point, being in the military, just in life. And I was able to kind of I was concerned. It's my son too. I thought I was going home to a kid with a missing eye. And all of a sudden, but you just kind of come back to reality. Okay, let's get the facts in order. What needs to happen? It turns out he bumped his head. He got a cut by his eye. Facial bleeding happens a lot. And it's just kind of, you rule these things out. But I think the point of that story is that by understanding how I might naturally react to a stressful circumstance and having the tools to combat that with a productive strategy to respond to stress is extremely helpful. And I think stress is a great example to talk through for exactly the point that you just made.
So you just great point. So there's a whole nother aspect of emotional intelligence that is called emotional agility. And there's a book by Susan David. It's called Emotional Agility. And what's really interesting is that she doesn't really mention the perspective that I come from, which is interesting. I'd love to talk to her sometime at some point. But the healthier that I've gotten emotionally, the healthier I've gotten emotionally, the more emotionally agile I am. The other dynamic is which also the other so not only my emotional agility has increased, my emotional bandwidth has increased, my emotional capacity has increased, my emotional endurance has increased, which another way to say that is resilience has increased as I've gotten healthier emotionally, and which impacts leadership, agility, etc. So if you were to graph my emotions 4 years ago, it would have looked like an EKG monitor, right?
Mm-hmm.
In 5 minutes, I could have gone Hulk mode. I could have started crying. I could have been happy. I would have experienced the whole spectrum in 5 minutes. Now, if you were to graph my emotions, it would look like a sine curve. So I'm much more emotionally stable. I'm much more emotionally predictable. Not that I don't experience highs or lows, but they don't impact me like they used to. Emotions don't impact me like they used to. It's so now, rather than it being my identity, I am angry, I am sad, I am scared, I am fearful. No, that's an identity statement. It's I feel scared, I feel sad, mad, whatever. So because when you make it an identity, your identity, man, it consumes. It's all consuming. It was all consuming me. Now it's something. It's something that I experience, something that happens to me. It's information. It's data. It's not my identity. So when like you said, as you get healthier emotionally, you can now allow emotions, and I call it your emotional balance sheet, once you learn how to read your emotional balance sheet, your emotional,
Yeah.
right? Your emotional
Yeah. Like
dashboard.
it reminds me of what a great, I don't remember who it was, but a good leader told me one time that you want to be able to observe your emotions, not let them control you. So it would, but like you don't necessarily shut them away or anything, but you recognize I'm feeling grief right now.
Boom.
I'm going to take some time to process this. And instead of like just bawling or being or mourning or whatever you're doing, understand, okay, I'm not going to make any hard decisions for a few months as I'm dealing with this. Like simple things like that, to where you recognize the state you're in. And it's just like you said, reading the balance sheet, like it's just observing the different emotion that's happening. And kind of, and that allows like this buffer. I compare it to two kind of areas. So like when I was, I played football at Army. So when I was watching, we watched film all the time in a game, right? Or of our practice of game film all the time. To the point where every time I would try to watch a football game in the NFL or just to enjoy, I would have two modes I would watch the game in. I would either just watch the game and have a good time like you're drinking a beer, or I'm analyzing the game, and I couldn't really even see what was happening. I couldn't really watch the game as a normal person watching it. I was always analyzing every detail. And the same thing would happen with music, where sometimes I'm listening to music and I play guitar. So like other times I'm trying to pull apart the sounds of the song, see how it's all coming together. And I think that the latter is a good way of thinking of your emotions, like understanding what's going on with them instead of just letting them drive you, letting you react to something. If you're angry, understanding that you're angry, understanding that what's going to be productive out of this anger versus what's just me just letting this feel good. And I think that's how I've tried to think of it. I think that's exactly what you're talking about when you're talking about reading this balance sheet.
Excellent analogies, Aaron. Excellent analogies. And that is a very emotionally intelligent way to describe how we should approach, deal with, interact with our emotions. It's watching game film of yourself. It's watching game footage of how you interacted in that situation, almost from a third party perspective. Okay, how did I respond there? How did that person respond? What was I feeling at the time? Right. But it takes a lot of awareness to be able to do that. You said it very well, which tells me that you do that. Me, that would have been space science fiction stuff. If I had talked to you and you told that to me 4 years ago, I'd have been like, dude, I have no idea what you just said, right? Because I was so detached from my emotions. I never let myself feel or express emotions at all. Or if I did express emotions, it was very inappropriately because I had no, again, self-management. And so you're exactly right. The other thing too is that a lot of people get, mistaken, is that there are no good and bad emotions. It's all data. It's a financial statement, right? Okay, so there's so maybe you're in the black, maybe you're in the red. But it's data. So now if you know that you're in the red, okay, well now we need to know, okay, which line item, where am I at, what needs to be, where do I need to dial in? It's just data. It's not, oh man, it's good numbers or bad numbers. It's just numbers. And
Yeah.
now it should impact how we make decisions going forward, but we should not, we've got to be careful. You said this also in one of your comments. I was really smart, is that what are the stories we have, the stories and beliefs we have about emotions? Picking that apart like game film, I love that analogy, is a way to really, what is your worldview? What are your thoughts about emotions and feelings? If you have a negative worldview because of your childhood or a loved one or something, gave you some trauma, whatever, you may think that emotions and feelings are bad. Well, there again, it's just data. And if you continue to run from and avoid that data on your financial statement, how can you improve your financial statement if you're not willing to look at it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think, I mean, it's just a great way of thinking of it, because I mean, you're never going to separate the feeling you have, but you might be able to separate the response to the feeling, right? I mean, I'm never going to be able to not laugh at something that's funny, but I can hold something in a certain situation, or if I'm grieving, there's a response that is within control, but how I react is different. I think if you can look at it like game film, like you're saying, and looking at it like it's just this data, it allows you to respond before you just allow it to kind of take you over and control you. It's like the Incredible Hulk kind of situation, right?
Bro, so I've got a story that is just, it will dial this point home. And so this is 4 years ago. This is one of the three things that happened to me that got me into this space. A lot of people say, dude, how did you get in this space? This is one of the things that got me in this space. So my daughter was 10. So 4 years ago, daughter was 10. We're in the living room in Hope Mills outside of Fort Bragg. And in this big living room, it had a skylight on it. It was like 6, 7 o'clock in the night. It was starting to get dark. And and we're just having a regular family conversation. I don't remember. It was just something random. Hey, what are we doing tomorrow? Or just something random. All of a sudden, the bottom drops out of the clouds. It's raining cats and dogs, like thunder, lightning, boom. Out of nowhere, my daughter goes from a 0 to a 10 emotionally. I had no idea. I had no idea what was going on. Guess what happened to me? Because I had no self-awareness, no self-management, I immediately went to a 10. So I immediately went from Bruce Banner to Incredible Hulk in 0.3 seconds. And like where I started I was shaken. Thank God, by God's grace, man, I walked 10 feet into our bedroom door, closed the door, locked it behind me, and sat on my bed. And I was freaking out, and I had no idea why. But because my daughter went to a 10, I immediately went to a 10. A couple minutes later, my wife got my daughter calmed down, knocks on the door, let her in. She stands in the corner away from me because she knew when Noble's in Hulk mode, like, don't poke the bear. Started to calm down, and she said, hey, Noble, hey, bro, I want to give you some skinny. She said, do you know that you can be, because so number one, I was an emotional 10. I was freaking out, and I was angry and rage because I was terrified of what I could have done if I stayed in that room. There is no doubt that if I went Hulk mode in front of my daughter and my wife, I'd be paying for the therapy right now. I thank God that, again, however he got me into my bedroom and locked me in there, but I was terrified of what I could have done, what I was capable of. And my wife said, Noble, once I started to calm down, do you realize that you can behave differently than how you feel? And my head exploded. I'm like, I laughed at her. I'm like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. That's not possible. You can't do that. She said, Noble, you can't do that. But I can, and there's a lot of other people that can separate their emotions from how they behave. And I'm like, well, that sounds great, briefs well. I have no idea what you're talking about, because when I feel an emotion, everyone's gonna know it, right? But that was because I was emotionally clueless at the time. So what you're saying is so true. We have the capacity to separate the stimulus from our response, from our behavior, but it takes emotional fitness and emotional health to be able to do that. Because there's a lot of us, again, me 4 years ago, who didn't have that capacity or ability until I started to get emotionally healthy.
In a lot of ways, I think good leaders do that, where they have to kind of fill the void of where the emotion of the team or the unit or the organization needs to go. You think of a football coach, if the locker room's totally dead before a game, well, they have to bring the emotion and the energy as a way of showing the team, this is the energy we need. Maybe after a game, everybody's down and they have to bring this positive outlook. And you see that all the time, I think, in leadership, where great leaders have a way of separating what their personal feeling is in the moment and being able to kind of act in such a way and behave in such a way to kind of fill that void. I think it's a wonderful way that you kind of put it, is behaving differently than you're feeling, which is really helpful. I wanted to ask you another kind of topic in the EQ family, and something I think you're really good at. And I think, as people are entrepreneurs and sales professionals, is the idea of charisma and how kind of the general world around charisma, how you can break that down and improve upon it. Talk to me a little bit about what people can do for things like charisma.
That's another great question, Aaron. So, and I've thought quite a bit about this. So charisma, Now part of it is because some people ask, like, I am a hardcore extrovert, and I popped out of the womb like this, bro. Like, I've always been kind of wired for people, but again, for most of my life, it's come from a very unhealthy place, right? It was emotionally needy, all that kind of stuff. But what I've realized about charisma is that the more you can become authentic, which requires self-awareness and self-management, the more our core values align with our thoughts, align with our beliefs, align with our actions, align with our words, the more that spinal column can align. When our back is aligned, the more effective, the more powerful, the more impactful we're going to be in the interactions that we have with other people, the more charismatic we are going to be. And again, I'm not saying that's got to be a certain personality, because I think extroverts, introverts can be charismatic, but it comes, in my opinion, it comes from that spinal column being fully aligned. But again, it takes coming from a very authentic place. And based on my experience now being in the CQ space for a couple of years, there are a lot of people who don't really know who they are because they haven't taken that intentional time to reflect, pray, meditate, journal.
Yeah.
What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And I love what you said. It's not dismissing these maybe potentially unpleasant emotions or these unpleasant characteristics or weaknesses. It's not dismissing them and pretending that, oh, I don't have these. No, it's listen, we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses, we all have, it's embracing all of it. That's coming from a truly authentic place. And the more you can again increase that self-awareness, increase that understanding of who you are and who God made you to be, introvert, extrovert, whatever all the different qualities and characteristics you have, the more you can understand, acknowledge, identify, embrace, and own all of that, strengths and weaknesses, all of it, the more authentic you can be, and the more you can show up as you, not trying to be, well, crap, I want to be as successful as Aaron, so
Yeah,
I need to be like Aaron. No.
I think you're completely right. I think, I think there's a couple precursors to getting there first, right? So, for example, the entry level sales charisma training is kind of to find like ground with somebody, right? So there's that. I think there's an interesting point to it, but I think that the immature person will try to just, people please their way into that, right? Like, oh, you like cars. Now I'm going to be a car guy for now. Or it's like, oh, you're into sports. So I'm going to be a sports guy today. Or you're into this political view. So I'll just, and then he's kind of chameleon. I think that's kind of this like more immature way. What I think you're describing is having the confidence, which would be the precursor to be able to be authentic, but still find that like ground with people. So it's like, oh, you're into cars. It's like, but like we can have a playful, but then they're into, 69 Corvettes, and you're just like, well, that's a crap car. You can have almost, because you're in line with your views, you're confident. It becomes a much deeper bond, I think, with each other because you are confident enough to hold a position.
Bro, so and I love that perspective. Okay, so look, there are people, and I've met them out there. And I've met some West Pointers like this. There are people out there who learn emotional intelligence and people skills and charisma as a transactional tool.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
But you can sniff that out in a skinny instant.
Yep.
When you're emotionally healthy. I don't have to pretend to be charismatic, or I'm not trying to use it as a tool to get to Aaron to do a business deal. No. I'm going to be me, and I can be interested in what Aaron's interested in because I'm genuinely interested in him, and I'm secure in my own stuff. I don't need to one up you. I don't need to, I think I think real estate's a terrible idea, Aaron. Why can't I just be interested in what Aaron's interested in? Why do I have to feel the need to one up, or, well, let me tell all my good stuff, Aaron. Why do I have to do that? Why do I have to, just like we talked about at the beginning, why do I have to feel like I have to compete with Aaron? Why can't I let Aaron, if I'm secure in who I am and who God's made me to be, why can't I let Aaron be whoever Aaron is? And
Yeah,
if he
appreciate
wants
the
to talk
beauty in
about,
that person.
yes, that's right.
I've
That's right.
found actually doing that to a fault is a problem too, where being really interested in somebody else and then getting into conversations you can never get out of. So like we're like, the other person's, it's, you're making it about them and it's exciting and you're actually kind of interested in what they're doing, but there's no way we're going to get out of this conversation and the amount of time that we really have allocated. I found the opposite side of that to be a problem in some cases, but
Yeah.
well, I think that the idea of charisma is really interesting. And one thing I've noticed about you, and I've told people this before when they're trying to figure out what makes someone likable, and I'm like, well, think about like, why do you like your dog? And well, you like your dog because your dog is jumping up and down when you come home, excited to see you. Imagine if every time you meet someone or see someone again or something like that, you greet them with the intensity that your dog greets you when you come home from a long day. Imagine how big of a difference that could make for somebody. They're going to be super jacked to see you every single time because it's just like you give them a big freaking bear hug and it's just like, hey, come on. And that is, I think, one tiny itty bitty little thing every single person could do. And it would night and day change their perception that they have around you.
Yes,
I mean, think about when
absolutely.
we jumped on the call, man.
Absolutely.
I thought that you were going to jump through the freaking computer at me, and it's just like you just brought so much intensity and energy, I think, to how excited you were to really be there to see someone, and it felt so real. And I mean, it was real. And I think that's something that other people can do. Well, anyway, what's kind of like your last little tip that you can give people who are just kind of discovering this EQ space? What's like, where's the entry point that they can start to get some good information?
Yeah, that's great. Great question. So let me do a couple quotes and then I'll hit that. One is, if you don't deal with your emotional issues, your friends, family, and coworkers will be forced to.
Fact. Yeah.
If you don't deal with your emotional issues, your friends, family, and coworkers will be forced to. The next thing is, emotionally healthy people help heal other people emotionally. So this journey, so what I would say is, this journey is so incredibly rewarding, fulfilling, and impactful, and carries with it tangible, concrete outcomes and results, personally and professionally.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it can be scary, it can be hard, it can be terrifying. The outcome is so worth the journey. And the only way to emotional health and emotional freedom is through some of that tough emotional stuff and emotional work that is required to get to the outcome. But the cool thing is, so now to your point, where would I start folks at, is that is to understand that you are in complete control of your emotional fitness program. So if you're new to this space, you do not have to run an emotional marathon tomorrow. Oh man, this sounds great, Noble. Let me jump in all the trauma that I've had as a kid. Let's go tomorrow. Okay, I don't recommend doing that. And if you need help, seek a professional. Go find a psychologist, psychiatrist, a therapist, a counselor, something like that that can help you with some of those big things. I recommend starting with some baby stuff. Hey, me and my wife argued over where we were going to go to dinner last night. Just start with some baby emotional stuff that is not super catastrophic and super traumatic. Just let's start with some base hits. Let's just work on building up. Start with a 10-pound dumbbell, emotional dumbbells. Don't throw on the Aaron Armstrong weights yet. I start with the Noble weights, man, where you got to start with some baby steps, some 10-pounders, right? Let's not go to the 100-pound dumbbell curls right now. So, and how do you do? So a lot of people are like, okay, well, how do you do that? Okay, so I got a few different ways to do that. Number one is go to Google and print out emotion wheel. You can print out an emotion wheel, put it on your desk, put it on your refrigerator at home, and start growing your emotional vocabulary. People that have a greater vocabulary to describe emotions have a higher emotional intelligence. Me, 4 years ago, I had 3 or 4 words. That's about all. Angry, sad, happy, and mad was about all I had. Now I just did one of my emotional exercises on I was having a tough time with my daughter growing up. She's 14, going to be out of the house in a few years. And I wrote down 55 different emotions off the top of my head. That is a miracle and proof that God exists, man. If I went from 4 emotional words to 55 in one, describing one experience I was going through, that is a massive proof of growth for me. So start Emotion Wheel. The second thing I recommend for all my coaching clients is download an app called Mood Meter. Mood Meter. I don't know whose it is. It's 99 cents on the App Store, but that's like the app version of the Emotion Wheel. And it takes 15 to 20 seconds to check in with yourself. Okay, where am I at? How am I feeling? Why am I feeling this? It takes 15 to 30 seconds. So the easiest way to start a habit is attach it to a habit you've already got. So I recommend before you eat or before you go to work or before you go home, attach it to a habit. Just take 15, 30 seconds, plug, do your app thing, fill it in, Mood Meter app, just to check in with yourself. And that will help begin growing people's self-awareness and also even into a little bit of the self-management stuff. Okay, that's the second thing. The third thing is check out my podcast, listen to other podcasts, other content that's talking about emotions and emotional intelligence. For me, I had no concept. When you said, hey, I'm going to sit in my emotions, I'm going to process it. I had no idea what that meant 4 years ago. What does it mean to sit in my emotions and process it? I don't even know what that meant. So you got to just start getting familiar with the vocabulary of emotional health and emotional intelligence. And a great way to start that, again, is just by checking out some different podcasts and stuff that talk about emotional health and emotional intelligence.
So where can they listen to your show?
EQGangster.com is the website. EQ Gangster is the podcast, is the YouTube. It's on, I think, all the major platforms, the podcast platforms out there. And then I'm on all the social media stuff as well. And then we have a membership group for those folks that are wanting to grow in community, kind of have an emotional fit, like a CrossFit gym, a CrossFit box, right? A workout gym. This is kind of my workout gym, emotional workout gym. It's called the EQ Mafia. We got a bunch of content in there, it's our membership. So, but EQGangster.com, you can find out all the skinny.
Noble, brother, it's always a pleasure catching up with you, man. I appreciate you. I appreciate what you're doing. I know that a lot of your kind of teachings and lessons has come from your own personal and professional growth. I know you're a man of faith, and I appreciate having you on today. And I hope that the listeners got some awesome golden nuggets learning about EQ from you today.
Big Aaron, thank you, bro. Always great to see you, dude. Thank you for being an inspiration and example in business and life, man. Totally appreciate you, brother.
All right. Well, you guys are listening to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews podcast about business, leadership, and life. Go out there, be something.